to set the conversation, I'll break into a presentation of the results that we received from entrepreneurs. And the conversation that we're going to have is going to be partly in response to this, and how to help entrepreneurs or advise entrepreneurs going through situations like this to face the times that we're currently in. So if you give me a second to share that. All right, so everybody who is currently online, thank you for participating. If you have any questions as we're giving this presentation and giving and speaking later on, we would like you to put your questions there's a question and answer section at the bottom there. Please add your questions during the presentation. You don't have to wait for the end. And we have managed to set aside some time for our panel of speakers to be able to respond to the questions that you have listed there. So with regards to working with entrepreneurs, what we found was that on the 26th of March, we launched a survey, and over the next 5 days, we managed to get entrepreneurs to respond to this. And the number of entrepreneurs that actually participated in this survey was about 98. That was by the 30th of March. And you would be good to know that the female participation in, and I think this is a metric that people keep trying to monitor, and we find that participation in as entrepreneurs is diversified, but I think maybe the conversation that we need to have is at what strata of the space are people participating. And you'll notice that most of the entrepreneurs that responded to this were below the age of 40, which could also be a factor of the survey being online. The sectors that most people that responded to the survey are involved in are agriculture and mainly services. There are a number of services that that are also included within the other places, but then if you accumulate those, you'll notice that it then reaches out to them. And the services, as we found out, was the majority of them were within running events, serving people, running restaurants, hospitality, and other areas like that lent themselves towards a number of the services that people that people are running businesses in. These businesses would mostly be termed as micro businesses because the majority of them are earning below 100,000 kwacha per annum. Only one business, if I recall, registered itself as earning above 10 million kwacha per year. And we see that over just about close to 15 earn between the range of 1 million to 10 million a year. But the bulk of those that responded definitely below 100,000 kwacha per annum. So constituting the size of these businesses is we find that well over 80% have less than 10 employees. Most of them list that their consumers are their primary clientele. So when you look at the types of businesses as whether they serve other businesses or they serve consumers, the majority of these, or just over 60%, serve are in direct contact with consumers or produce products or services that go to consumers. And most of these being offering products or services that go into the market for businesses. Then only 24% of those. Then 34% are businesses that offer products, meaning that 60%, the majority being 76%, are what you then see within the services market. So we have very few people that are actually within the manufacturing sector or actually making products, or producing products that actually get into the market. Now, coming to the time, it seems that 93% of the businesses that participated in the interview believe that COVID-19 would have a negative impact on the businesses because most of these businesses actually have direct contact with the people. And although Zambia is not into full lockdown, if that was to happen, the question then becomes, would some of these businesses be able to shift their offerings online, and 50%, just about half of those said that they would be able to do that. And what's interesting, if you look into that, is that if some of these businesses have to re-engineer themselves to then start providing the businesses online, we noticed that 76% of them might not have the cash to keep their business afloat for the next 3 months. And so being resilient through this period is something that they need to start managing. And 54% believe that their current low cash reserves, state of low cash reserves, is already due to COVID-19, with them seeing a number of already seeing a number of customers, either a drop in the number of customers that are serving their businesses, and also businesses suddenly having to shift their focus, where there were initial potential business that they would have operated with, but then a number of them also seeing now businesses, especially those in the B2B sector, having to reshift their focus to address the current climate before attending to businesses that they would have had. And I think the tourism sector, probably being the first business to have registered the largest number of hits within this scope. So 49% say that if they were going to make it through this, through the next 3 months, they would rely on their reserves. 8% believe that they would need to be able to get loans. 3% expect to be supported by family, and 25% might have to consider other sources. If the businesses that are affected, if they were to say where they'd be affected, most of them believe that sales is the largest, is where they're getting the largest knock. And the salaries and wages will probably be what would drive them, is something that they'll have to be able to serve with regards to serving the people that work within their businesses. So when you talk about processes and you talk about people are getting the most affected. And then rentals was listed as third, because businesses still have to operate. And even if we claim that some businesses are able to work from home, businesses already have contracts with the buildings that they're currently in, and you have to consider what is going to happen to them. Future investments is something that is also taking place. And then some are worried about those that owe them money being able to pay them the money back. And then also assets that are within the assets that the businesses operate being affected by, and that brings it down to about 5.3% being concerned about assets. And you can imagine that in businesses where you have assets that then become dormant during this time, like I said, the tourism sector being one of those places where if you had event halls, you had vehicles that could transport people, or you had lodges and rooms that you would then offer, then you've got assets that are no longer in play during that are possibly no longer in play. From the 98 people that responded, they said if they couldn't go through the next 3 months, and this is the question was we envisaged this happening over 3 months, is that if they had to let go over 3 months, they believed that we counted a total of 225 people that would be adversely affected as employees of these businesses if these businesses either had to shut down or these businesses had to let go of people. So you can directly see the direct impact on small businesses and already the direct impact on employees and the workforce and people starts to happen. So if you had to calculate that across the large number of small businesses that operate in Zambia, we start to see that this could have the adverse effect could count going forward in very large ways. Is there a way for some of these businesses to work in the future? There are some believe that they could pivot towards working from home, using virtual working or taking their businesses online. Some would have to look towards diversifying their businesses and re-engineering their processes so that they find either new products or services that could then survive during this period. Others would have to rethink completely new lines and then disrupt new market services and get into there. But there's still a number that would still have to consider whether it's still a large number, 38% being unsure about what they would do during this time, and 13% who clearly said they did not know how they would get through this. So can the government support, and can private sector get to support? So tax exemption being the most popular thing that people were asking for, subsidies, as we've seen rolling out in other countries, and grants being coming through to businesses. And these are conversations that are going on, and we'd like to see with the state of the current economy, is this something that we can count on government for? Business to business, can we look at potential institutions offering grants? Would there be sponsorships, or are there other solutions that businesses are operating with one another? Are there deals that businesses can make with one another to make sure that neither payments are made late? We see that banks are now, the Bank of Zambia and the banks are now releasing some sort of relief tax. For example, we heard from ZRA that penalties and so on there could be consideration around penalties and late payments in this period. And also, but the big one is rentals. If people can't work, can they pay for the rentals of the homes that they're in? If people can't operate their businesses, can operate their businesses from their places? Should they continue to pay rent for businesses, for buildings that they're no longer in? But also understanding that rental income is in itself a business, and what's the compromise that would have to be made there. There are some comments from some of the businesses. For example, this is one: my products depend on travel to South Africa and China, and the current conditions do not allow me to make travel out of the country. So import and exports already taking a hit here. Customers happen to be small-scale farmers, are mainly based in the outskirts of town. They will not be able to come into town to get products for fear of contacting COVID-19. Agro dealers and people in the agribusiness already taking a knock there. New products cannot be introduced to clients online, as not all the farmers are conversant with new technology. Again, we're talking about using technology in these times, but will the nation be able to adopt technology as fast as we want them to, so that we can continue to do business? This report is on the BongoHive website. If you go to the BongoHive website, bongohive.co.zm/COVID-19, where we are beginning to list not only the report, but other resources that entrepreneurs can find and might find helpful. And we will, during this period, continue to list other resources, and other talks can be found in bongohive.co.zm/webinars for any talks that and advice with regards to how we can operate our businesses. I will stop this presentation here and bring it back to our panelists and engage them with their thoughts and feedback on this report by asking them, getting them to get into their businesses. So I know that you've made your introductions, and we say the value of a business, if we start from the value of a business, is to the businesses deliver value towards their customers. And we all have a myriad of customers that we deal with. So can we talk about the customers and just shortly define who the customers that we serve are, and what value we actually deliver to them? But also think about, I'd also like you to think about not only you as a business, but have your customers been affected by COVID-19? And I guess that will then lend itself to whether that has had a knock-on effect on your business. Let's start. I'll start this round with Mark.
Okay, so two businesses. One is enterprise technology support services. So this is helping enterprises leverage the technology they have or deploy existing solutions. The second part of that is helping them with acquiring the licenses. So you find that when you're making an enterprise purchase for certain licenses, for example, Microsoft licenses, you find that you have to buy them directly from Microsoft through a partner. So we come and play that role of a Microsoft partner for this region. Obviously, the impact on that front has been, obviously there's a high demand for the use of technology based on the need for remote work given the circumstances, but there's also an interesting countermeasure, which is basically the cost of, especially a lot of licenses, which are priced in USD. So that has had a huge impact. You have a lot of businesses who have annual turn-in contracts, which they budgeted for a worst case of 14.8 to 15.2 at the worst. And you look at where it's at now, that has a huge impact on things like renewals or the ability to continue using specific solutions. And the cost to switch is, it might be easy for some of our small businesses, but for some large organizations, that becomes pretty complex. The second business is the Super Veg Farms, which focuses on producing microgreens. So microgreens are basically plants harvested in the first 14 to 23 days of their lifespan. Concept behind that is that most of the nutrition which is found in a vegetable is actually contained in the seed. And so what happens is, as a plant grows, basically that nutrition is just distributed across the size of a plant. So ideally, the smaller they are when you consume them, the more nutritional content there is. Why does that matter, or who is that value for? Is actually for chefs. So you find that chefs learn about this stuff when they go to a culinary school and the like. And so they know that for people like me who don't like eating their vegetables, the easiest way for them is to sprinkle these microgreens on a piece of T-bone, and they hope that I actually get some of that nutrition. So the impact there obviously is that a lot of hotels and restaurants are closed. The tourists are not coming. A lot of restaurants, some of the restaurants don't have the capability right now to actually fully work out the whole delivery takeaway kind of scenario. So you find for a lot of them, they're cash strapped at the moment. And so you find that they've had to make a lot of adjustments even in the volumes that they actually procure. So on that front, it's, I'd say, close to an 85% wipe in terms of revenue from that source in terms of impact. So you find that the balance is pretty much individual households, small catering type of customers that we've had. And that's what we're now working on, trying to expand to fill the void, literally.
Great. Simunza, should I just jump in there?
Oh, yes, please do.
Yes. Okay, great. I couldn't hear you. Yeah. So first of all, really great information and feedback on the survey. I think these are the sort of things we like to see, particularly for policymakers, to really appreciate and understand what's out there, because I think there's a disconnect very much so still on what is being given for SMEs here in Zambia at the moment and what is being offered, to understand which sectors are needed, things of that nature. So really very interesting feedback. So to answer your first question, is who is my customer? It really depends on the product I'm selling. So I'll start with easy noodles, which is probably an easier one for people. They see it on a supermarket's shelf. So really our customer is basically all of you who are mothers, who are bachelors, who are students, who are looking for that quick and convenient meal option and on a budget sometimes. So already COVID has affected us because our highest sales throughout the year are during school periods. So for us, the 18th of March was really devastating for us because we knew it meant until schools open, we're going to see definitely a decrease in terms of our sales to schools or sales to school-going children. However, we also feel it's a very resilient product because it's also a very convenient meal. So if your kids are at home, you can still buy it and give it to your kids. However, what we have seen though is that our supermarkets, which is our avenue to you as a consumer, did one thing we saw in March. They did big shopping. So they were afraid of maybe a lockdown and did bulk buying. And now what has happened is we've seen a decrease. And I think they're really trying to manage their own cash flow and really trying to put money into products which are faster moving. And we're seeing ourselves a slowdown on orders for easy noodles. However, on the flip side, and the Easy Noodles makes up about 80% of my revenue. It is it's for us our leading brand, and we really rely on it to pay our bills. So this is a really hard time for us because we're not sure how long this is going to take. We're trying to see, okay, if this month we only sell 40%, how are we going to do in expenses? So it's been really hard because our key leader, our key contract is basically suffering. But again, we have a diversified product range now, which is very helpful. And we've now seen a demand for our nutritional products. As you know, the flip side of this terrible virus is that people are not unable, particularly those working in the informal sector, are stuck in that they're not able to earn maybe a daily wage, or they've been told to stay home. If you're a construction worker, there's no construction, or they just are really concerned about their jobs. So these people are unable to buy food. So the crisis has now been a lot of NGOs really afraid of urban malnutrition, urban hunger, and therefore urban unrest. So the past 3 weeks, and I'm telling you, when you talk about international calls, I've been on Zoom speaking to some of the big NGOs this is a worldwide crisis, who are really looking at food security and nutrition in a very innovative way, and saying how can they work with governments to ensure that we really manage this issue around food security and ensure the right products, nutrient-dense foods are reaching the populations, either through grants from government or our people are able to afford them. But of course, the problem right now is that incomes are really strained. So we are trying to work with NGOs to actually give food to these people. So we've had, like, in the past 3 or 4 weeks, quite a significant amount of inquiries as well as contracts coming in for the cereal. And, as I said, it was the poor cousin. We didn't really pay much attention. Now we're in a panic because we're like, okay, do we have capacity? Is ZESCO going to give us power? So we've now got different issues. I mean, do we have enough packaging? Different issues we didn't think about. And because COVID has now affected supply chains, you can't sort of walk into Sobe and say, can I have 4,000 packets? And they'll just look at you and say, well, come back in June. So we've had a lot of issues. So whilst they have been, it's been quite tough, I think, in trying to manage the shock. And it really is a shock for everybody. I think you as an SME, don't be hard on yourself because you think, well, how did I get here? How come I have no income? Trust me, I have a board of very smart people. And in January, we did not see this coming, right? We had a different risk profile. We've had SARS, we've had bird flu, we've had Ebola, and it was never here. So our risks were really managing supply chain, was really around, can the equipment arrive on time? Can the contractors be here to service the line? Not what are we going to do if the disease is in Zambia? How do we manage the distribution? A simple change in for instance, I can no longer sell as well as I used to the informal sector. And although we are in ShopRite, I've got to say something, and it's the best known secret, is that 50% of my sales are made in the informal sector, to the wholesalers, to the small shops, 50%. And this is cash, guys. So as much as it's nice to sell to ShopRite, those guys, they take your cash. So, but you can imagine what COVID has done is that now I can't get a salesman into any of the compounds to sell because we're really afraid in terms of managing disease and or contraction of COVID. And it means I've had to really pull back and say, forego this income because we just don't know what we can't control this. So lots of different things have arisen because of this. And I'm sure a lot of you on the call are also experiencing this thing and saying, okay, so I can't distribute to the informal sector. Can I distribute to someone else? Can I ask them to increase their volume? Because remember, I'm now foregoing some income in the informal sector and really relying on someone else to saying, look, how can we manage this better? And, I've been on a ton of webinars and people are like, have you decreased your price? And I'm like, in which country can you reduce your price? I mean, this crazy kwacha, which wants to kill us, and costs. So it's really, there are lots of strategies and different countries are experiencing different things. But, when you have economic fundamentals, which are affecting everything, it's really hard for business, right? So I think I've said a lot of things here, but I think, sharing from where we are is that in the 6 weeks that we've had COVID in Zambia, we have, it's really made us sit up. It's made us know that, not one product is key. It has made us speak to our customer more. We are speaking to ShopRite a lot more to understand what they need, when they need it. Also for payments. Someone has just written a question, I was reading it about, I've got so much money out there as receivables, how do I get it? And I'm just like, I'm walking into, well, I'm calling customers and say, okay, what's the problem? How, can we have a payment plan? How do we do this? Or give me back my stock so I can sell it to someone who can pay me. But this is the time when we need to be resilient. We need to make, be agile. The greatest thing about entrepreneurs, guys, is that you are so agile. You're not fixed in systems, approved in Washington or somewhere else. You are the system. So you can change the plan, you can change the product, you can change the offering, but you've got to work through it and actually think about it. Today's solution might change next month because we just don't know where this is going to end, and that's a crisis. In one of my boards, I'll just finish up now. One of my boards that I chair, the MD said this is the first time ever he's allowed to say he doesn't know. It's the truth. So that's my contribution. Yeah.
That does sound. But you bring up a good number of points there, which we'll get into with regards what the future is like and what. But then, Sipho, your customers, how are they faring in this time?
I don't know if there's much more to say after that. Everyone has covered a lot of things. I think the issue is you have to be nimble. We don't know where we're going. I'm operating simply on the motto of prepare for the worst and hope for the best. So we have to look at everything from supply chains, how to keep your business alive, how to keep staff safe, where do we think it's going to go. The advantage we have is we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have examples from other countries around the world that we're constantly looking at, from Ecuador, New York, Bergamo, Wuhan. What happened there? How was it resolved? Now, when you look at the richer countries, England or the United Kingdom have thrown 330 billion pounds asking for relief on the Zambian government in the survey. Where are we going to get anything? 330 billion kwacha is not even in the equation. So we can't look at some of the solutions those businesses have dealt with. I think for salaries of £2,500 and below, the British government is going to pay 80% of that salary to all businesses. I mean, we dream if that could happen here, and it can't. So everyone is going to have to take a knock somewhere, and we have to try and find our way. But these examples are out there. So even as the last responder at Memorial Park, what we're doing is looking at what the impacts are. If you look at New York, they've got mass burials. They're burying by bulldozer, stacking three coffins high. And it's heartbreaking, and it's all there. People at the ferry crying, wishing they could just put a flower on their grave. They don't even know. If we head to that direction, if you're working on prepare for the worst, we're going to go to that. If you look at UK deaths on the 27th of March, 40, and the 27th of hospital deaths on the 27th of April was 21,000. They're saying up to 40-something thousand in 1 month in the UK, and that's with a highly sophisticated medical supply chain. I think it's Ecuador. It's a South American country. People are abandoning coffins on the street. It's burying in playgrounds because they just can't keep their bodies in their houses because there's no mortuary space. So there's stories in every field all around the world for us to prepare for the worst. We can go and see what's happening. A restaurant becoming a grocery store. And really, I saw one, I think it was in New York, on TV the other day, where really what they were doing was getting rid of their stock. They had all this stock for their restaurant, And they decided, well, we can't open the restaurant, let's change it into a grocery store. And people were coming in because they liked their ingredients and so on. And then they actually started finding, you know, they bought flour, for example, by the sack. It wasn't nicely packaged into little flour for home baking. And they started repackaging it. As Monica says, you've got supply chain issues. So I think they were very innovative in the way they repackaged it. People understood. And actually now they started buying more things to be in bulk, to be able to then break it down and sell. So they had a successful conversion into a grocery store, effectively. Others who've tried to move their restaurants to takeaways, it hasn't worked, they don't have the infrastructure. So people, but those examples are out there. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We've got Mr. Krupnik watching here. And I've been watching him asking for issues about delivery and can people deliver. You know, you might have your own vehicles for deliveries, and there's an opportunity. People still need hardware. People still need things to be able to operate through this. That's a supply chain issue, and you might have to divert your office Corolla into a delivery vehicle. You might not be able to deliver, you know, building sand from Builder's Warehouse, but you may be able to be nimble and change usage of your assets so that you can earn something so you can get through this. But ultimately, we're all going to take a hit. Forget COVID, just look at the economic figures. So we're talking about recession figures worse than the Great Depression. And so we can go back to the Great Depression and see what people did and what people did wrong when you have severe shocks to the economic system. And we have to be nimble. I remember in Zimbabwe, when they were going through one of their many crises, a lot of these Upper Mwamba neighborhoods were changing their swimming pools into fish ponds and selling fish. And I thought it's very simple but ingenious. They couldn't buy the chlorine because there was no chlorine to buy, Forex, whatnot. So their pools were green, so put fish in them, sell them, and that's how far we've all got to think. But I get a sense, even from your survey, people are like, let's just hang on for 3 months and then it'll all be over. And if someone can help me through, a family member can help me through, government can help me through, someone must help me through. It's not going to happen. We don't have a government that can afford it. We don't have family members who can afford it. We have to start making a plan. So it sounds a bit bleak, but I think there's actually opportunity in a lot of things if we're able to rethink ways we've done things.
I think
and not keep hoping that.
I was going to say it's interesting because someone was saying to me, this is a distributor in sort of high density areas, and she said to me, "Oh, if I could get my hands on any more soap," and I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "There's not enough soap in Zambia right now, and because there's only one manufacturer, right?" So, you know, out of crisis, there's always opportunity. Sometimes you have to really open your eyes and see what's right in front of you. And it'll be interesting, you know, you talked about services. Is it now time to really pivot from services to some other things? I mean, there are a lot of things you can do in the meantime and maybe focus on different strengths, you know. So it's really, as Sipho says, let's think differently and always actually, what is it? You know, a crisis is a sort of the mother of invention. If you want to succeed, you will change your strategy or you'll change the business. They are, of course, businesses that will fail. I mean, sometimes no matter what. I mean, if you are a hotel business, or actually if you are an airline right now, you are probably bound to fail, right? And it is what it is. Even after the crisis, we suspect there's some industries will take so much longer to get up because of, you know, maybe the expense of travel or how much it's going to take, you know, social distancing on planes and things like that. So, but thankfully, none of us are operating an airline here. or if you're providing services to an airline, you know. But I think what we want to really use this platform is to be much more progressive. We know the situation is bad, but let's please ask questions which allow you to think forward. To say if you have, let's like be solution oriented. I mean, I could moan all day about my problems. Trust me, I probably have a lot more than you do. But let's try and help you. I mean, you've got some pretty good resources here.
Yeah. Speaking of resources, in the manufacturing sector, Monica, do you have some form of advocacy happening from the Zambia Association of Manufacturers or Chambers of Commerce? Is this have you found them helpful? I'm assuming that you belong to the chambers and the Association of Manufacturers during this period.
So it's interesting in that obviously we're a much smaller manufacturer than some of the big boys, and we only really joined the club, let's say about 2 years ago. And we joined the club when there was all that crazy talk about sales tax and nobody knew if we were coming or going. But it was the first time as an association, the manufacturers got together and absolutely said no, that this would not work and it would kill an industry. And off the back of that, we have really learned to work much better together. I think it could obviously be much more improved, but really we speak with one voice. We have a really excellent president who's very, very busy. But one thing is clear is that we are very vocal about what it's really going to take for the manufacturing sector to really increase its impact in the economy. I mean, it really is a very small percentage to GDP, although you think it'll be bigger, but it's actually quite small. There are not very many manufacturers in Zambia. And from all the sort of seminars or webinars I've been attending, actually manufacturing is the key for many economies to move forward, right? And so even for Zambia, we need to really be thinking about what can we do, what can we make here to create jobs, to increase skills, to export, etc. But the chamber, the association has been helpful because, for instance, you've seen a number of measures which have been put into place currently on some of the tax exemptions and things like that. I mean, we're still pushing for a few things, more things. And the government gives you a little bit and not the whole lot, but doesn't understand they're all interconnected, but we're still working on it. Which also brings me to this session. You know, for SMEs, I think it'll help if you spoke as a voice, if there was some way all of you on the call could be part of, could speak with one voice. Because for instance, all this money, this 10 billion they've given through banks, I mean, if you're making less than 100,000 kwacha per annum, I'm going to say the likelihood that one of the big banks is going to get out of bed for you is zero, you know, and that means this money which government is giving is not targeted correctly. It means that we need to be saying, hold on, that the people who really need it are not going to be able to access it because of the vehicle you have used, and you need to use a different vehicle for SMEs. Because you remember, the banks are not the most friendly on the good days. I mean, when everything is normal, they're not the nicest of guys. So in crisis, I don't know if they're going to be any nicer, you know what I mean? Or their processes are going to be any less. So all those documents you have to fill in. And all I remember hearing from the governor was that you must have been in good standing as at the last quarter. And guys, the economy was tough. I mean, there are very few businesses who are doing great, even the mines. So for SMEs, I mean, it's a really hard ask. You know, so again, we have to find a way to really get, I mean, using your survey as a basis, but to get the singular voice to those who are in decision-making and policy to say, can you set aside, because maybe 100 million kwacha for SMEs through using this vehicle, you know, I think we need to think differently for the smaller business.
Yeah, we do. And we hope that we believe that there are efforts being made, but we hope that those that are working on them will release those. You talk about banking, and Sipho, being an ex-banker, use very good phrases like former gamekeeper tend poacher. But also one of the brilliant examples that you've in various conversations and meetings that I've attended where you've spoken is the difference between restructuring and defaulting on a loan. There are businesses that are going to need money, but there are businesses that have borrowed money as well. And what's this conversation going to be? I mean, you worked on restructuring companies, you worked on saving companies when you were a banker. what does that process look like for a company to say, okay, great, we got a loan 2 years ago, 3 years ago, or a year ago from the bank, and we don't know what the future's like. It could be 3 months, it could be 6 months, it could be the next year. What's that conversation a business has to have with their bank, and to manage their relationship going forward?
I mean, yeah, there are two parts to that. One is what Monica was talking about. Even if you could access debt now, what is your cash flow? Personally, and I don't want to get in trouble again, but I can't help myself. I got to speak my mind. It's a waste of time to spend billion. Absolute waste of time. They're giving the money to the banks. The banks have to secure it with treasury bills or cash at the Bank of Zambia, and then take all the risk on everyone else. Banks are not going to lend to anybody in these areas. They're not interested, especially when they're going to have to take the risk. Even if Bank of Zambia had given, I mean, it happened again, we can look elsewhere. Didn't UK try that? They said 80% of the risk is taken by the British government, 20% by the banks. The banks weren't dishing it out. The bank on 20% risk, let alone here, I think they're securing it on 110%. So banks are giving 110% cash to access that 10 billion, and then having to take all the risk at a 5% margin. Well, you can go and take government risk at 30% on treasury bills. Well, why do you have to lend to Sipho Phiri? Who's he? They're not going to lend to us. So if you're hoping that you can go and borrow this money, it's not really there. Unless you've got cash security somewhere, the bank is not going to lend to you. And if you've got cash security, use your cash. Secondly, even if you did manage, where's your business going? What's it going to look like at the end? You owe this money. You're going to have to secure it. So you have to be very careful borrowing to get through this. You're much better looking at, it depends. If you're very service orientated, you're very reliant on your salaries and your staff, then you have to look at equity schemes. You have to look at unpaid leave. You have to look at being able to cut down. Those people you can stay. People need to live. So you need to be able to say, how much can you sacrifice so that we can get through this? The balance I can give you through some equity or something. We got to be looking at different methods to get through this. And debt is, for me, is certainly not one of them, because we don't know how long this is going to be. You borrow thinking I'm going to come out in 3 months' time, and it turns out to be 1.5 years' time when this vaccine comes out. And even then, the whole global economy is still in recession. Then what? You lose your house? So yeah, you have to be very careful. If you've already got that, you're a bit more fortunate. As I said, you walk into the bank now and you say, okay, let's have a frank talk. The Bank of Zambia have done a very good thing in terms of changing the provisioning rules. And that has been very helpful. So now that they don't have to provision automatically, you can restructure. And if you restructure, you don't have to provision anyway. And, agreeing with them that, listen, I need a 6-month moratorium, stick it on to the end. As long as I don't compound that interest, you stick my repayments back onto the end. I'll be able to come through. I have a plan, and you base that plan on, if you see what's happened in Wuhan, if you see what's happened in South Korea, where people are coming out of this, this has been the rebound, these are the facts, and this is how we can do it. This is where we have big advantages. We have examples to follow. And banks, when they see that, then it's credible. If you're just saying, listen, I hope in 3 months' time everything is over and everything will go back to normal, and then I'll be able to pay you. Banks don't live on hope. And, the old definition of umbrella lending, when the sun is shining, the bank is very quick to lend you an umbrella. But as soon as the clouds come out, let alone the rain, they want that umbrella back. So that is what you must remember. is they're very, very big clouds. The banks are looking at getting the umbrella back. You're the one who has to convince them. It's not in your interest. So I think there's opportunity, and you just have to face it head on. You can't run away. You can't hope. You can't wish. I wish it would go back. I hope it's going to go back in a month. Oh, it's not coming. You have got to prepare, and you've got to face it head on, as scary as it is. And as Monica says, so businesses will fail. Some will fail. And even if you do a plan with all your staff, you know, if this thing is as bad as they say it is, or as we can see it is in other countries, you know, our staff are in danger, our families are in danger. We've really got to think about how resilient you are, how do you work all of your redundancies, how do you keep staff separated so if some get it, you still can operate with others. You know, you've really got to get into the detail of how you do it, how you change your systems, how you move to online contracts, how you do deliveries. But again, even like airlines, Monica mentioned airlines. You know, an airline can pivot. You've seen some carrying personal protective equipment strapped into seats and changing the passenger airlines essentially into freight. There's still big opportunities in freight. And if I was heading an airline right now, I would be looking at ripping out those seats quick. You know, maybe half the plane, Ethiopian, for example, half the plane is got seats of social distancing. The other front half and the undercarriage is all about cargo and moving things. We still all need things. Monica could probably fill a plane with packaging. So if I was an airline, I'd be the one calling Monica saying, listen, I've got a spare plane. I'll fly it for you. I just need to cover my costs. I need to, you know, I'll trim down. My cargo is going to be cheap. If you can take the whole plane, I can fly once a week to China to bring stuff in. Monica, maybe if she can fill a quarter of a plane, she'll be on the phone to Mr. Krupnik. She'll be on the phone to everybody to fill up the rest of the plane. And so you can start moving things. You can start really just radically rethinking. But the problem is most people, including airlines, but we want to carry passengers. Yeah, we all know what we want to do, but things have changed. And I think there's an opportunity in those changes, and we can find it and we can work it. And the key issue is how you keep people safe.
Yeah. So we've had a number of questions, and one of the things that we're talking about is reengineering. Mark, if I start to get questions now, and I'll start to look at questions from the people that are attending, and with regards to reengineering, and Sipho and Monica have also brought about teams are now working half and half. Some are operating operating remotely, and in some cases you still need people to get into the factory. If you're talking like in Monica's case, or if you're talking at Sipho's place, you still need people to go to still need people in construction. You still need people to be able to. But from the remote area, from the efficiency area, optimization area, what are the tools people need to consider? What are the tools people need to consider in setting themselves up towards to do that? And I do know, and we'll get into that later on, is that there will still be a need for them to consider using digital with regards to re-engineering their processes. But offhand, what those who are thinking of going remote, what tools would you advise them to consider?
Yeah, so I think with regards to tools, I mean, obviously the tools will vary based on what you're trying to achieve. I think one of the things is, so the ability to make decisions and make decisions in real time is going to be something which is going to be very key as we go through this process, because you find there's something which might make sense and work for the next 3 weeks, and then week 4, things change rapidly, and you have to be, I think has been shared by Sipho, saying we have to be nimble and ready. So one thing is obviously tools that help you get visibility. So if you have people who are working remotely, whether it's manufacturing, people who are doing distribution delivery, how do you monitor what activity is actually going on, what workloads are being delivered? So simple tools which can help you do data capturing, either sit on people's mobile devices, for example, are things which could be of help. Obviously, there's the communication tools which we already, I think, platforms like Facebook, WhatsApp kind of prepared people for, you know, the constant threads and streams of communication around business. I think it's more about how do you memorialize that type of content into now structured decisions which people can refer to later, as opposed to endless streaming and searching for what an action point was. I think whatever we pick for tools has to be driven at the end of the day by what are we trying to respond to as a business. So the real question will become, how in tune are we with our customers and their evolving needs? Mm-hmm. And that is what's going to drive what exactly we need to pivot to in terms of a tool solution which will help us stay alive and obviously try and keep our businesses afloat. So understanding, connecting with the customer, trying to step away from, I think that another example which Sipho gave was about, you know, people still want to fill planes with people as opposed to cargo. And one of the big things around change is the fear of change is really just the fear of temporal incompetence, right? Whenever you start doing something new or differently, you're a beginner and some people don't like that. And so I think it's about being open and really looking and saying, what specific scenario do I have? Is it delivery? Is it remote consultation? Is it contactless payment? Is it what form of low touch distribution can we implement? So the systems will vary based on what the business need is and whether it's a physical product being delivered or is it services. Looking back at the survey, I think one of the challenges is obviously we've seen a huge response from people who are in the service industry. And I think Monica highlighted this earlier, saying that manufacturing is one of the key things which we're going to need to just to progress as an economy, COVID or not, right? And it's a matter of how we respond to what are so-called trends versus what fundamentals are. And we always talk about, you know, this part of the world leapfrogging certain things, but what's happening is we've ended up leapfrogging fundamentals, going straight to being an end consumer, as opposed to building up what needs to happen in between. So I think the technologies definitely will vary. Some will be apps, some will be trying to integrate to contactless payments, be able to display your products online, facilitate delivery. Some people need to have an understanding of how e-commerce works. So what type of logistics, what's the promise around fulfillment of delivery, and ability to handle things like issues, complaints, reverse logistics, returns. How do we deal with that? So there's a lot of change which needs to happen depending on the nature of your business. So, I mean, if people have specific scenario questions based on their business, I can give a target and say, look, use this tool and use it this way.
Yeah, all right, please. If you do have any scenarios that you'd like to get answers, please put them in the question and answer session. Tinashe Mazala would like to know with regards to year started 2020, lovely. Plans were rolling out, I think end of the quarter in 2019, you forecasted your plans for 2020 going forward. You understood where the economy was, you understood what was going to happen, and you were saying, well, great, these are the plans we need to make more. You reported to your boards. How are you managing the emotional intelligence or the fear, the pressure, and everything that is going on, not only for yourselves, but for your teams to be able to lead people during these times as business leaders? Anyone can jump in there. Monica, would you like to?
Monica, why are you quiet?
I'm answering emails.
I was typing a response on the emotional intelligence thing. I think that really is a key question of our times now. It is how you psychologically cope with all of this. And we are out of our comfort zones, whether we like it or not. Some people love it. Some people thrive in this. This is the greatest time. But, you know, if you try and mix everything up and you're thinking of school fees and you're thinking of your Congolese and you're thinking of where we're going to go and how am I going to do, what's going to happen next year, and if you muddle it all up, it just becomes overwhelming. It becomes overwhelming for everyone. But you can break it down into what you can deal with. I think a lot of people, just the first thing is, what can't I change? Well, you can't change the fact that there's a global recession. You can't change the fact that, you know, countries are shutting down, airlines are shutting down, your supply chains are breaking down. You can't change those facts. For some of us who are a bit older, we remember the 80s and 90s, you know, and the example I gave recently to someone was one of the things you could do in those days, you could get fantastically fresh prawns from Mozambique. You know, we had all kinds of, we had the evil apartheid regime, you had all kinds of logistical problems. But people managed to get this illicit smuggled cold chain from the shores of Mozambique into people's houses in Lusaka. And it was just, you couldn't buy soap, you couldn't buy things in the shops, but someone could deliver fresh prawns to you. And I think it started with someone who was just desperate for it and started making a plan and sending someone in New Mozambique, can you get this fisherman and put it in a cold box and take it to the border of Zimbabwe, and then he got another friend, and then very soon it became a business. And a very big business at the time. So there are always these type of opportunities. Opportunities come from need, as I always say, and this, but it's how you deal with it psychologically. Yes, it's easier to walk into a big foreign food chain supermarket and then say, go to the aisle and pick something up and go home. You know, well, maybe we have easy soap now and easy prawns, and, you know, we've got to think really, and what we can control, we can control.
Yeah. And
that is where you've got to focus. Do not focus on how do I control COVID. That is nothing we can do. It's coming or it's not coming. Either we'll die in droves, or for whatever exemption we have, we won't. But we have to prepare, we have to be nimble, and the emotional approach to that is what will get you through this. And that's why I think it's a very, very important question, is how you deal with it. And difficult decisions are difficult decisions. If you've got to fire someone and you've got, what did we have? We had most people with less than 100 staff, huh?
Less than
80 something, 93% or something.
10 employees, 80% less than 10 employees.
With less than
83% less than 10 employees. Now, if you have to fire 5 of them to keep 5 on, what are your choices? You know, it's a decision. If you don't make that decision, all 10 are gone and you. So do you fire the 5? Do you call them all in and say, listen, 5 of you have to go, you choose amongst yourself? Or do you call them all in and say, you can all take a 50% cut and pay? Involve people in these decisions, but face them head on. If you're worried and saying, no, I hope Mulenga doesn't come in today, then I can use that as an excuse to fire him. You're not dealing with the issue head on. Just deal with it head on. and say to everyone, and that's it. Either we all take this together, or I'll make a hard decision, 5 of you go. Normal times I wouldn't have done this, but these are not normal times. And so I actually find in these times, making harder decisions is easier, because what are people going to argue? Oh, that Phiri is not a nice fellow. Yeah, well, I've got to save as much as possible. So this is the time, and I think that's just your focus on some of these things. I've had some valleys saying, these youngsters are going to learn how we lived in the 80s now. So their turn. Us, we are used to making a plan. And it's true. Actually, where we're heading with supply chain problems, with foreign exchange problems, where we're heading is where you go into a shop and, a whole Kabalonga supermarket, as it was called in those days, was one of our biggest stores. You'll find a few shelves of Soviet toilet paper, and then maybe some couple of things of Boom washing paste, and that's about it, a whole supermarket. But people still made plans. And so it's not as bad, it's bad, but you don't have to think that it's just gloom and doom. We've been through this before, we'll get through this again. Easier times will come. But for entrepreneurs, this is the time of opportunity. And it's a time of really rethinking how you do things. And maybe, hotels. I was flabbergasted that, am I allowed to use brand names here? 2 large international hotels, the fanciest ones in Lusaka, closed. I was thinking to myself, hey, I would have been the first ones to go to government. Now that's started to happen. To say, we'll make it a quarantine center.
Yeah.
They didn't and you can stay here. We've got CCTV on every floor. You can put a guard on every floor, and we'll just make it a big quarantine center. Everyone can come and stay here. It is not the fancy wine-sipping, whiskey-drinking customers that they're used to. Some of them might be, but the fact of the matter is, it's real estate. And I got to rethink it. Rip out all the fancy stuff, put in plain stuff which can be washed down with a spray jet when you need to disinfect a room, and that's it. It now becomes a COVID quarantine center. Convert them into hospitals. You say to government, listen, I'll make it a hospital. So they just weren't thinking, it's shut. And I just think that's not thinking. That's not really trying to adapt. And maybe their numbers were bad anyway, and they wanted to use this as an excuse. I don't know. But all of us have an opportunity to rethink how we do things, whether it's changing your swimming pool into a fish farm, or using your office Corolla as buy a trailer and start doing deliveries for Mi'kmaq. Rethink.
Great, all great points. And just, I think your point is that about really, it is hard, but really, I think, take heart. Everyone is going through it, and definitely find a place where, or somewhere where you can speak to share, personal, because I think there's always going to be a panic. I mean, I have panic every day, actually, so it's not unusual. But also definitely, I think, encourage BongoHive to have more webinars, because I think people learn a lot from others, and it's a place where you can share and ask questions, which helps to deal with emotional dramas or panic, or what can I do about this, or where can I get more information about X, Y, and Z. But also, I was going to say just some really practical issues. Sipho has talked about a few of them, about really looking at your costs, really looking at your employees, who is key right now. If you're only working 20%, is the whole staff complement really key? Can you have a discussion about taking the leave now, coming, or taking half of your pay? Also saying, look, can we terminate the contract? But if things get better, I'll call you, because guys, as we all know, a good employee is hard to come by. So you might have really good stuff, but you have no work. So definitely keep in mind those sorts of issues. But look at your costs. can you afford to be in the premises you're currently renting? Is it now time to speak to the landlord to say, look, I'm not making any money. Are you going to at least allow me to pay late? Or if not, then I'm going to have to find lots of premises. And there are a lot of premises, guys. There's lots of empty spaces in Lusaka right now. So nice time to start negotiating about downscaling. Sell stuff. Ask me, you learn as an entrepreneur, you don't need all these fancy cars. It's a car to take you from A to B. If you need some capital, it might be right in front of you. Sell something with, to manage your costs if you need to pay a supplier right away. Speak to your customers. We have been speaking to a lot of our customers to understand their financial position, because remember, it's not just you, it's everybody in this crisis. And you owe me 10 kwacha. Okay, can you pay me 3 now? Can you pay me 3 next week? I'll come every week, because you are also in a problem. If he can't, is there a way to get back what you sold? Is there a way to make some other arrangement? But it's not going to happen by osmosis. You've got to speak to customers to understand what they're going through and how they're going through it. But also, I think, speak to your staff. I think it's one thing we're not really good at here in Zambia. I mean, from top leadership down, we're not really good at speaking to people and, really explaining to them where you are, how it's affected the business, how they too can, it's going to affect their lives. You're having one-on-one financial conversations now, like, okay, you've got paid today. Today is the 30th. Do not spend all your money by Friday, because it's a long weekend. Do not drink all of it, because there is no money. There might not be a salary at the end of next month. So those are conversations. Now you become a financial planner for your staff, because it's going to be important. Because if your staff are strained, you are going to be strained. So you're like, guys, okay, please remember, buy cleaning materials first, buy food first, pay your rent. But don't be careless with money right now. We just don't know how long the crisis is. So I think these are things I've been trying to do a lot more with myself, and also just asking them, how are you? Guys, this disease is affecting everybody. Yeah. Is there a family member who's unwell? Things like that. So this is a time we also have to be really empathetic with staff and the people who help us get through. So which is customers, your stakeholders, your shareholders, your directors, your funders, your parents, whoever is that, really help you through it. But I think that those are some of the tidbits I think really would help you get through this on the emotional side. So, and people, the more empathetic you are, I think people then will also give you, particularly if you're the founder, a little break, because you can't solve all the problems in one day. And then you may find that some of them will say, okay, I'll get a pay cut because I know you don't have any money right now. But because I believe in you and your leadership and the business and the brand or the services we provide, so I'm willing to take less to help you, So, but I think also let's communicate a lot more to our employees and to those who we provide a service to or otherwise.
Yeah. From what we've discussed and what we've gathered here is that definitely managing this time is having conversations with your stakeholders, whether it's your board, your customers that might be, that you need to collect payments from, and have those and negotiate with them so that you can at least get some revenue coming through into the business. Talking consistent conversations with your team and the people that you work with. Also, you're not the only one who's affected, but getting into a place where you know that things are, the team are all right, they're managing what's going on, and they're able to come in and still be productive going on, and that things that as a team you understand that you're trying to figure out a way through this, because it definitely is, like you said, it definitely is a new way going forward for everybody. Redundancy, Joe Pop says redundancy is very expensive. 2 months per year worked plus any other gratuities in contracts. How can we reduce the workforce with the level of redundancy costs? So if you have to consider redundancy costs, what's the workaround there? Because do you actually have the reserves that say that you can pay out these redundancy costs? And I know that the Ministry of Labour has sent out sort of trying to tell everybody, please keep redundancy costs in place. But what can be done as entrepreneurs?
It's really tough, huh? I think it's the worst. I mean, redundancy is it's very expensive, and it's for those who might not understand, because remember, you've got lots of small business on the line. Redundancy is the legal process in which you would terminate a contract and you pay someone out I think now it's like I think a month for every year served. I think that's what it is.
2 months. 2 months for every year.
2 months for every year. So I think the reality is, I don't know any business who has been setting aside a kitty for redundancy. I mean, if they are, I don't know what they do. But I think right now, and I'm not thinking about redundancy because I can't afford it, but what I think I am doing is having frank discussions with employees. There are no jobs out there. So the reality is, like, can we sit here and agree that I pay you less, perhaps? That maybe you work maybe 2 or 3 days a week. I think that's my only advice, is to see how you can agree with employees. Otherwise, the law is really not employer friendly in terms of dealing with termination of contracts in terms of crisis like this. And I think there have been lots of efforts to speak to labor about how to go around them. And so far, we're not seeing anything. Even the concept of forced leave. Last week, they just said they're coming up with new regulations, which probably will make it much more onerous for us to take employees on forced leave. So I wish I had a better answer. And I'm not a labor specialist. Before someone quotes me on Twitter, I think I'm just saying maybe it's worth just having a discussion with employees to cut pay, but to kind of keep them until things get better.
Yeah, I guess if government, if the government was able to decide that civil servants could get their pay cuts at the end of last year, maybe we could also use that example when we talk to the Ministry of Labor. In negotiating to do that with our teams and our staff. And a lot of people are asking about being able to access loans and being able to that. And Sipho, I think, talked about, even though there's this 10 billion kwacha that has gone into the central bank for banks to access, I think he gave a very good picture of that, why we might or might not be able to access it. But I think a quick question that has come here, and this is somebody who's anonymous, has asked the question, is that, and this is the last question, where we're drawing on the final 4 minutes of this conversation, is how do you make the decision to close if you have to get to that point? Like, what are the signs, what are the flags that then say, yes, it was a journey, COVID took us out, maybe next time. Mark?
So I think one of the first things is, obviously you need to know the current position of your business, right? Your numbers, how much runway you have, what new opportunity is there or what new challenge is there, and what is the cost of trying to make that adaptation. Because some of us will find that we will actually kill ourselves trying to adapt. So it's a question of what is the appropriate response. I think so it's really going to be specific to the business and what's going on with them. There is I think in Sipho's earlier point, he talked about people having to make a plan in the 80s. And the question is, what's your plan? Your plan could be to say, listen, I need to pause this Netflix show and resume it later. Because we don't know how long this situation is going to go on for. We don't know whether we're going to have more deaths, whether we're going to have an even firmer restrictions on movement. How's that going to look like? So we don't know. And so it's about looking at what assets do you have. And I mean, great if you have a bit of cash and saying, would this cash be more useful if I just pause and sit and wait? But it really depends on where you are and what's going on in your life. For some businesses, I mean, if you still have a problem to solve, value to deliver and extract, then yes, by all means, keep pushing on and figure out how to deliver that value and find smart ways to extract it. A simple framework could be just to look at your business from a perspective of, were you relevant pre-COVID? Are you going to be irrelevant or relevant past COVID, or whatever the new normal is going to be? Because some businesses are going to float between they were very necessary and now they're irrelevant, or vice versa. And so it's a question of figuring out which box are you in and what is the cost, what is the cost of survival for the business as an entity? Talking about like the hard conversations and decisions to make. I mean, on the agribusiness side, we had a conversation with our staff, and just basically they have a clear picture saying the business can continue to pay you up to point X, and you start to get half of what you get up to point Y, and after point Z, I don't know. And so if you're willing to come up with ideas, if you want to be paid in form of produce, like let's figure this out, but up after point Z, we don't know. So it really depends on the current position of what the vitals are for the business, and even its ability to actually continue going forward. And obviously, what are the costs of you actually shuttering your business as it is?
Yeah. All right. I think it's, thank you very much to three of you and everybody that joined us for this webinar. We've sadly had to come to an end, but we hope that these are conversations that we will continue to have. We're able to do them digitally, and we continue to look for forums where we can continue to have these conversations that guide people through this. And as changes start to happen, if government comes up with solutions that actually address small businesses, these are things that we want to be able to share with you. We have, BongoHive has set up a page with resources, bongohive.co.zm/COVID-19, bongohive.co.zm/COVID-19 online, that you can visit, that lists the resources that we can get, that Zambian businesses who should be able to get, whether it's webinars that you can listen to, whether it's advice that you can take, and whether it's actually financing resources that might open up for businesses that will be able to resiliently get through this time. And that's something that has to be expressed about all businesses, is that very definitely some businesses, it's very sad, but the reality is some businesses will have to close down for the meantime. And this is also for the sake of saving you as an entrepreneur. Going forward into this place. Like Mark said, is it a pause button until later? Some businesses will be able to get through this, and that's where resources are being seen to see which businesses can be saved to get through this. And some businesses, new businesses will come up through this, and we'll continue to post those. Webinars are available on bongohive.co.zm/webinars. We are being grateful that we've been joined in this podcast by webinar, by Monica Musonda, who's a founder and CEO of Java Foods, Sipho Phiri, who's executive chairman at Western Power Company and owner of Pamwamba Investments, and Mark, who's the founder and principal of Venivi, who gladly given their time here. So thank you to you for joining us, and thank you definitely for everybody for joining us. Have a good time and goodbye.
Thanks, Simunza. Great.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Speak to you guys later. Bye.
Right.
All right.